The South Korean government has officially announced plans to provide humanitarian assistance to North Korea worth some $8 million through international bodies, including UNICEF and the World Food Program. It has also allowed South Korean businessmen to visit their sites at the Inter-Korean Joint Industrial Complex in Gaeseong, North Korea. Today, we go in-depth on Seoul's efforts to keep the dialogue alive with North Korea and whether those efforts could lead to a resumption of nuclear negotiations with Pyeongyang. For that, Dr. Kim Hyun-wook, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, now joins us in the studio. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
So the South Korean government is now officially looking into ways to provide humanitarian assistance to North Korea. And it says it'll seek to resume its previous plans that was suspended in 2017. Could you start off by telling us what the 2017 assistance plan was about and why it was suspended?
Yes, 2017 was the year that the Moon Jae-in government started its term, and right after its inauguration, what President Moon Jae-in did was to initiate a North-South detente, despite some of the criticism inside the United States. It was the same amount of food aid at the time, $8 million worth. But what happened was that after the South Korean government decided to provide food aid to North Korea, I think it was September 2017, North Korea conducted its sixth nuclear test, and also the ICBM test was conducted in November of the same year. So it was the atmosphere that Kim Jong-un and President Trump were exchanging verbal critique towards each other, criticizing the other person, things like that. The atmosphere was really bad, both in bilateral terms and also at the United Nations. So it was exactly not the mood and atmosphere for South Korean government to provide the food aid that it decided internally. Maybe next year might have been possible, but things have been going around, and also that detente mood was kind of beginning to develop, but also the U.S. policy towards North Korea was basically to continue sanctions on North Korea. So actually these things were not pretty much coalescing with each other at the time.
The South Korean government plans to provide $8 million, that's about 9.6 billion Korean won, in humanitarian aid through international bodies. And the Unification Ministry says the donation mostly aims to help the children and pregnant women in North Korea. How much of a help do you think the $8 million donation will be?
It depends upon how and in what way the money goes into the right, spot and right place. That's the thing that U.S. and United Nations high-level officials are worrying about most. Whether there is a good monitoring system that can really guarantee the distribution of those food into the right place and right people. Maybe that is the reason why South Korean government has not, conducted the food aid by a direct channel with North, because in that case, the monitoring system might not be guaranteed. By the international agencies and international institutions, the monitoring system can be much more clear and guaranteed than the bilateral channel between North and South Koreas. So it all depends upon how their monitoring system is guaranteed and how North Korea gives access to the international institutions so that they can really monitor the distribution of food inside North Korea, how that food is distributed effectively and efficiently. So we are not sure about that yet, but we'll see how it goes. Still inside the United States, they're very skeptical about the humanitarian food aid because of these kinds of distribution clarity issues.
So you think if the donation is distributed through international bodies, it's more likely that it will be provided to the people in actual need?
It might. The monitoring system will work more efficiently than north-south food aid,
channels.
but still international agencies they would not be guaranteeing whether their monitoring system will be having full access inside North Korea.
So that too cannot be fully guaranteed.
No.
Now, South Korea is also mulling to provide food aid through a direct channel, and this separately from the $8 million donation. And the government says it'll also take into account the public consensus on the matter. Do you think this food aid the government is pushing for will be proceeded smoothly?
Well, I think there are some diverging opinions inside South Korea. Some part would say that, because North Korea is not taking serious steps for denuclearization, humanitarian aid should not be given to North Korea because that is also utilized, dispused by the North Korean regime for other purposes, not for the purposes of those people in need inside North Korea. But I think the direct channel, based, provision of food into North Korea should be something that would take more time. We have to take a look at whether the food aid, the humanitarian aid by international agencies, how they're doing inside North Korea, how that food aid inside North Korea is implemented efficiently. We have to take a look at that first and see what will be the North Korean response to that. And then maybe the North Korea, South Korea direct channel-based food aid can be considered. Also, this issue is something kind of sensitive because the United States might think of this as a violation of sanctions. Something that is given by South Korea to North Korea, even though that's the humanitarian aid, maybe this can really develop into some other types of economic aid, which would ultimately be violating the international, economic sanctions. That's what the U.S. is worrying about. So it's a kind of sensitive issues.
North Korea is now going through its worst food crisis in 4 decades. And on top of that, I hear they're also going through a severe drought. Is there any chance that North Korea might actually reject South Korea's offer for help?
I think it's a half-half, but there is also a possibility that they will reject the food aid. But because of the food situations, I think a more possibility is that they would accept the food aid from the international agency. But the funny thing is that they are not responding to this food aid at all. I mean, they're criticizing South Korea for allowing the external powers to intervene in the nationalistic moves. They're criticizing the United States and demanding them to initiate a third summit by the end of this year, something like that. If that doesn't happen, there will be another nuclear and ICBM test, things like that. So I think from the North Korean perspective, one of the reasons why they are not responding to this food aid and humanitarian aid is kind of implication that despite all these humanitarian aid, North Korea would not coalesce with the conditions of negotiations provided by the United States. North Korea would just stick to the conditions that it has provided to the United States. So now the U.S. and North Korea, their negotiating conditions would not coalesce with each other. They would just go parallel with each other. So I don't think personally humanitarian aid would be good for the starving people inside North Korea. But this I don't think would be a good incentive for the North Korea and the United States dialogue and negotiations to resume in the near future.
South Korea has also approved South Korean entrepreneurs to visit and get a check on their business sites at the joint industrial complex in Gaeseong in North Korea. And this marks the first time since the Gaeseong shut down 3 years ago. And the South Korean government says that this visit permit has nothing to do with the resumption of the Gaeseong industrial complex. Then why does the permit come now?
I think, South Korean government, even though the South Korean government said that this is not related to the resumption of Gaeseong complex, still South Korean government wants to use these kinds of initial move to develop further in the future. develop in the future towards a more serious economic cooperation between North and South Korea. Even though the United States would not like it. The U.S. position is very firm. Even though Trump government would not bolster the existing sanctions, but continue sanctions, it will continue sanctions and bolster the implementation of existing sanctions. That's what President Trump wants to do. So the resumption of Gaeseong complex will be definitely the violations of United Nations Security Council resolutions, sanction resolutions, and South Korean government knows that. So that's why it says that this kinds of moves, sending entrepreneurs to the Gaeseong complex, is not meaning that it's resuming the Gaeseong complex. But I think maybe they want to develop this into something more than this. I mean, they think that there should be more vibrating and positive agreement that comes out in the summit between Trump and Moon Jae-in next month.
And again, North Korea is yet to make any statements or reaction to Seoul's efforts to resume, actually giving the visit permit to Korean entrepreneurs to get to the Gaeseong Industrial Complex. What's your expectation of Pyongyang's reaction on this?
Yes, as I have told you already, Pyongyang and North Korea is still, demanding the U.S. and South Korea to change their postures. North Korea wants South Korea to initiate and begin the economic cooperation with North Korea, despite that's the violation of international sanctions. And also North Korea wants the U.S. to change its postures towards North Korean negotiations, change its one deal approach towards a step-by-step and simultaneous approach, wants to go back to the pre-Hanoi situations. So these are the desires, these are the policy objectives of North Korea. And these objectives of North Korea is something that is not easily satisfied with the initial current South Korean moves to send people into Gaeseong and food aid to North Korea, things like that.
All right, Dr. Kim, thank you for your perspectives today.
Thank you very much.
And that does it for this edition of News in Depth. From all of us here at Arirang, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you right back here same time tomorrow.